Hey guys, welcome to the stream. How are you guys today? Hope you're doing well. Saturday afternoon for me, and we're going to do some level selection stuff. But before that, we're going to have a little look at a problem we were having the other night. Okay, that I never got to the bottom of, but I never really investigated it either. So we're going to have a look at that. Now, what that is when we go to options and we select a particular thing, we set this up for this character to do. Hi Slors, how are you? How are you today? We set this up so that one of these would do another animation, right? So you'll notice that he's doing the same animation loop at the moment, right? So we're going to find out which one that was, and then we're going to find out why it's not doing the animation, right? And it's the display. Okay, so he should be doing the charge animation. Okay, so you will notice that when we hit display, it prints hello. Okay, but he's not doing the charge animation. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to go to our, it's not this pawn, it is our menu pawn. Okay, so if we go to our main pawn, what are you up to today, Slors? Apart from hopefully watching a bit of my stuff. So if we look at PCMM Chronicles, right, we're going to stop this. And this character is basically, what we're going to do is we're going to say event tick, right? And it's not in the character, but what we'll do is we'll get a variable and we'll call it menu char. Okay, and we're gonna get this guy and his BP char mm. Okay, so we're going to do get, no we're not, BP char mm. Okay, now we're obviously going to have to do something different. Well, we don't need this at the moment, right? But what we want to do is we want to get this guy, right? Then we want to say mesh. In fact, no we don't. We just want to get his current, we're going to have to get his animation instance. Right, wait a minute. We might have to do, let's have a look. Current, get current state. And then we're going to do print string. Right, and that is going to go in there. And that gets us a friendly name, which is what we want, right? We join that in, and at the end of begin play, we get actors of class, and we say BP char and we basically say for each, now because there's only one, we can just do this in the loop and we don't really care, right? But what we can do is we can do that and set it to that, right? And now when we press play, we should get the current state of our character. So as you can see, idle. Then if we're going to begin play, it says looking behind, pointing, options, shake head, clapping, and there's the charge, right? So now if we click on options and then we click display, you'll notice that his thing, we've got this, but it's not playing the animation. Right? But it is in the right mode. And we do get the actors of class, char get that. And as you can see, we set it to clapping. Right, so when we come in here, right, we should automatically set it to clapping. And it does. Right, it's set it to clapping. But for whatever reason, I listed the videos. I saw your message last night. It's going well. How's it going for you? So fundamentally, this is working. Right, but for some reason, our animations have stopped working. right? So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do that, right? And then I'm going to get our char mm. And all of that's okay. I'm going to see if any of this changes when I hit options, okay? I mean, I don't see why it would. But let's just check on that. Animation class. Anim BPMM, which is right. Okay, so if we hit options, we don't expect any of that to change, and it didn't. Right? Which is absolutely bizarre. Right, I'll tell you what, we're going to do something here. What I'm going to do is we're going to get our button, okay, our apply button, okay, so this is an audio, so this is it here, okay, so if we go audio button, right, we can go on hovered, okay, and with the on hovered, we can get our mesh anim instance, right, and we can set a current state, right, and we'll change it to clapping. Right? Now what we'll do is we'll check that this code is exactly the same as what we're using for everything else. Right, which it is. Animate mesh, anim instance, set it there. Okay, so we're doing exactly the same thing, apart from we're not setting a text box, but when we hover, and then what we'll do is we'll duplicate this, right, and when we unhover, we'll set it back to idle. Okay, so this is basically doing the exact same thing as what we were doing before, right, with the main menu screen. Now I have got another form of attack here, right, so this will basically go here. Okay, so we're going to try that. We go to options, And that's working now. Wait a minute. Right, hang on a second here. Hang on a second. This works, but you'll notice that what we actually ended up doing there this here, I'm going to set that to idle. I'm wondering if it was stuck in a different. There we go. Okay, so that's going to loop now, okay? Until we do that. Right, but that's fine. I'm fine with that because that's not the way it's going to work in the end. I was just checking, right? But obviously we were stuck in a clapping and it couldn't get out of it, so it could never get back to idle. So the idea there was that we needed to set it to the right thing, basically. So I'm going to stop that for now, right? And I'm sure we had, it was a violin, right? So basically, right? And that's pretty cool, as you can see. Right now, our display thing, that's going to get stuck in this loop because I never switch it off, right? But if we go back to audio, you see that's not getting stuck, right? The only time this is going to work is basically when I come off of that and then go back on it. And that's my expected behavior because basically it's getting stuck in this loop, right? And it can't get out because I'm never setting it back to idle, okay? Now, there is a way I can do this. But at least we have solved the problem of our we've solved the problem of the, what do you call it? getting stuck in the wrong thing and not working. Right, now, there's a thing here we could do actually, right? What we could do is we can check out see, that's a bit of a shame. Right, the point here was that, well, it's fairly simple to do actually, because if you'll notice here, right, we set the active widget, and now all we actually need to do is basically say, we just write a function, right, and say reset animation to idle. Okay, and then what we do is we get the mesh. Now we could do this the whole thing from the controller, which might have actually probably been a better idea. Right, so I think that's what we'll do. Right, get controller, and what's it called again? Was it char something? Yeah, get menu char, and we'll change up to make this a bit easier to work with, right? Then what we should really do is actually go into our this one, and we should create the function in here, right? So what we should do is reset char to idle, right? And then basically what we do is say menu char, get that, get anim instance, and then we should set the current state to idle, right? Save that, and then in our options menu we don't need to say this at all. Right, we can just go to our event graph, we can get our controller, then we basically say char, get menu char or character, in fact we don't even need to do that, we just get our controller, reset char to idle, and that's basically it. Right, and we can just basically plonk these into the right place. And this is a much better way of doing it, because if I do it through the controller, I can put stuff on a timeline, etc. Or at least on a timer, which means that I can basically control better when it plays. Like as I said, I can put it on a loop, but then control how often or how frequently that loop will play. Right? So as I said, we just basically pop these all in here. And then once we're ready with some animations, we can do our thing. These can get removed. Right, we're not doing anything with these yet. Right, I suppose we can do something in here. Right, and we should really do this in the controller again now. So what we really want to do is basically go to our PC controller, right, and then add another function and say set anim current state. Okay, and we're going to pass in the current state, okay, which is E state. Now what is this? Okay, it's none of them. Right, but if we go to this animation blueprint, right, we can click on this and it is EBHMM state. Okay. So it's EMM there we go. And call it new state. Okay, so our next thing is we get our menu char, we get anim instance, and we set the current state. Okay. And that is not it. The new state goes in here. Okay. We can save that. And that's going to work like a little treat, I do believe. Going to get a drink of my coffee. So give me 1 second. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just getting a drink of my coffee. And hey guys, I'm trying to get to 500 subscribers, so it would be very helpful if you guys would just hit the subscribe button. And so the next thing we can actually do is we can update these, right? Because basically now we don't need this. All we need is a reference to the controller. Okay, so we don't need to do this, right? But we are going to do, this is something I normally do anyway, but I'll delete that, right? Don't worry, we'll get it all back working pretty quick. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to get player controller. Now, in fact, you know what we could do? We could not even bother doing that, right? What we could do is we could just add variable controller, right? And we know it's PC Chronicles. Okay, and then all we'll do is we'll make it instance editable and explode on spawn. So when our actual controller spawns the main menu, then we're going to pass it in anyway, right? So in here, right, we create all that, we do all that, super smashing, great, fantastic. Then we create this, right? So what we'll do is we'll refresh nodes, we get our controller, and we just get a reference to self, right? And we pop that right in there. Okay, we can do the same with the options, by the way, if we so desire. And that is all super fine. And we don't actually even need to do this. In fact, it'd probably be better if we did not do that, right? What I'm going to do is our menu character, I'm going to make it instance editable, right? And can we actually, we can't. Or yes, or can we? See, what we want to do is that, but it's not going to allow us. And that's because our actual controller isn't in the level at that point. Right, so we'll just put that back in. 4 months. Cyber shell rev. But there's no finite time on it. It really all depends. There's a lot of things it depends on. It depends on whether you've got a clear view of what you want the game to be and exactly how you're going to do it, and if you've got the assets, and if you've got the knowledge of how to do it. Right, these things can all have an impact on the time it's going to take you, right? So number one, if you've no idea what you're doing, or the type of game you're going to make, then obviously you're going to mess about. You're not going to go in a direction because you have no clear direction, right? Now, the reason it took me 4 months was because, number one, I had the assets. I had already got the assets like years ago. They weren't even for Unreal Engine, right? They were for Unity. And I basically transferred them into Unreal Engine, right? So that was the first task, right? But I knew because I had those assets, I had all the towers and stuff, right? That was basically, I had the towers and stuff, and I had the monsters, right? So I knew I was going to make a tower defense game because I had the towers, right? So basically, I knew exactly what I was doing. Then the next thing I wanted to do was make it like, what's it called? Defense Grid, right? So Defense Grid is my favourite tower defense game. So I had a brief outline of how that works. Okay? So I had a clear... I didn't plan anything, right? I didn't plan anything. I just knew what I was going to do. I knew what assets I had, and I knew the game I wanted to base it on. So I had a clear direction in which way I was going, but I didn't plan it per se. I didn't like sit down and write stuff down or anything like that. I just had an idea. Here's how I'm going to do it. It's going to work pretty much like Defense Grid, and it's going to use these assets, right? Now, the next part of that is actually having the assets, right? If you've not got the assets, it can take you months just to do the assets, right? So, and you might not be able to do it at all because you might never be able to model up to the level that you want your game to look as, right? In which case you maybe need to go to the store, but even then, any store might not have all the assets that you require, okay? So there's that. And then the next thing is knowledge, right? Like, for example, there's no way I would have been able to make the game in 4 months if I'd never touched Unreal Engine, right? So it wasn't my first rodeo. Not that I released any other game, but I worked for about 2 years on something else, learning Unreal Engine. Now, there's another caveat to that, right? Well, basically every genre already exists, right? The only difference that you're going to probably have is some sort of tweak to a pre-existing genre, right? Or you're going to mash together a couple of different genres, but you still know how those genres work. Like, you know how an RTS works, you know how a tower defense game works, you know how an FPS works, right? So all of these things, you basically know how they're going to work. The only thing is maybe your idea's got a different tweak on it, or maybe it's not even got a different tweak on it. A lot of games are pretty much exactly the same. Think of first-person shooters. They don't really have that many different mechanics for each other, right? The only difference is probably their location, right? Where they're set. Right? But again, your problem is, do you have the assets, right? Now, Unreal Engine, Unity got their strengths, got their weaknesses, but I think you'll find in Unreal Engine that if you want to make an FPS, then you're in luck, right? Because a lot of the assets that are free, that are available, that you can use, are for first-person shooters, right? It's just a simple fact, right? But if you try to set let's say your first-person shooter in, I don't know, let's say the world that I'm doing, right? Like in a Victorian world, then you're going to be struggling, right? Because you're not going to have the assets for that freely available in Unreal Engine or Unity, probably. Yes, I mean, what you're saying is correct, right? You've got certain mechanics that work. Like, you would consider both Zelda and Dark Souls open world games, right? But they're both set in, like, they've got a different feel to them. One is obviously a more, let's say, fantasy horror type setting. One is a more sort of whimsical fantasy type setting. But the mechanics of the game are probably very, very, very similar, right? It's just how the mechanics are implemented, right? To be either A, more punishing, or B, more forgiving, right? It just depends how you want to imagine that game for yourself and how you want to actually do it, right? But the problem for most people, right, that are starting out, when you first talk to them, right, here's my advice, right? Forget trying to make Call of Duty. Forget trying to make Grand Theft Auto, right? Because you've got to remember that these games are made by hundreds of people, right? And they're putting in, let's say they're putting in 40 hours a week, right? And they're working on it for, let's say, 3 years, right? That's conservative, right? And let's remember that these people are all professionals. They've been doing it for years and years and years. So they're experts, right? So you've got experts in modelling, you've got experts in animation, you've got experts in programming, you've got experts in network coding, you've got experts in logic. Across the board, you've got the best in the business, right? If you think that one person can bring out Grand Theft Auto 6 just because they've got Unreal Engine, I'm sorry, but you're deluded. You're deluding yourself. Right, so basically the first thing I say is, if it's your first project, think of a game from the past that you liked, that you know all the mechanics of, right? You know how the game basically works, and then redo it in Unreal Engine. Right? Maybe you release it if you've got all different graphics or whatever, you can do what you want, right? But basically have it a clone of something else, right? And that'll teach you enough to then work on something new that you want to work on, right? But one of the main things is finish it, right? You've got to finish them. It's as simple as that. You've got to finish it. Because number one, you prove to yourself that you can finish it. And number two, you've got the receipts. If somebody says to you, if you say I'm a game developer, and they'll say, have you developed any games? Oh yeah, I've done loads of games. Where are they? Well, you can say, well, it's on Steam. You can buy it right now. Right, so if you're trying to get a job or that in the industry and they say, well, where's your portfolio? You just say, well, you can look, here's my Steam account and here's my games that I made. Right? Which 99% of indie developers don't have because they've never finished the game. Now, it does help that I've been a programmer for 45 years, but hey ho, concepts are still the same. So, what were we doing? Oh, that's right. We're moving all of our code from the actual menus into the player controller. Okay, so that we can keep it all in one particular place, and that makes a heck of a lot more blooming sense. And the problem is when you're developing live. Right, here's the two problems, Cybershell, right? If you're still there. Number one, if you're doing it live, you have no time for planning. Right? So basically I just come in, sit down and say, well, there's no psychological aspect of making players enjoy the game. Right? It's either they enjoy it or they don't. Right? There isn't a magic formula that makes a player enjoy a game, right? Because there's plenty of games that come out that are $60 that are AAA and people think they're rubbish. Right? So there's no magic formula to writing a good game. You've just got to give it your best shot. And one of the things that you'll find is if your game's actually good, you'll play it. Right? And at that point you think, this is actually pretty good. Okay, if there's never a point where you want to play the game yourself, then you're barking up the wrong tree. Okay, now the other thing regarding marketing that I know is either A, you're going to spend a crap ton of money, which normally indie developers don't have, so you can forget that one. And number two is luck or contacts, right? Luck or contacts, that's your two things. The luck being that you release your game or you give your game to a YouTuber, a big YouTuber, and they happen to like it, right? That's luck, right? Because I'm pretty sure that 9 times out of 10, if it's a big YouTuber and you don't know them, then they probably won't even play your game. In fact, they probably won't even open your email, right? So, it's luck. Right, so marketing isn't really a thing for, unless you, well, the other thing is if you've got a big YouTube channel, right? Now, studios don't have it. If studios had some magic formula, then every single game that gets made would be a hit. And everybody would love it, right? It's the same as saying every movie. You could apply this to movies, you could apply it to music, you could apply it to anything, right? Why is one thing more popular than another? Well, mostly it's opinion, right? But as far as gameplay is concerned, they've hit a satisfying gameplay loop, right? And there's no magic formula for that. Right? So, if you can go and do a degree on it, right, and you get the answer, then why do games companies have failures? That would be simply impossible. Right? Why are there boring games out there? If there's a degree on making things not boring. Quite simply, what you're saying doesn't make sense. So, if they've hid it in a vault, they don't actually go into the vault and find out themselves, right? Because the biggest companies can write the most terrible games. So, back to this, what we need to do now is we need to change, well, we don't need to change any of this because we're not actually doing any of the animations here. No, you're wrong, Cybershell. It isn't trial and error stored in archives, right? Because if that was the case, then we would study it and we would know the answer. Hi, Jamie. Afan Khan. Yes, there is. There's a heck of a lot of money in adult games, right? Especially if you do like a Kickstarter or something like that. Cybershell, what are you talking about? Buzz Lightyear just failed. So they don't have no magic bullet. Hey Poobell, how you doing? Jammy, how you doing? It's alright, they've been deleted, Jammy, don't worry. Right, so yeah. If Disney had the answer, then why was Buzz Lightyear a failure? Yes, I remember you, Jammy, don't worry. So I'll wait for your answer on that one, Cybershell. And the Little Mermaid remake is going to fail. All their live action stuff has failed. Everybody thinks they're rubbish. So how have Disney got the answer? Well, it doesn't really matter because obviously if that's the case, you know, if the bosses wanted to make money, they would say, stick to our old, way of doing things. Right? But Disney just had like a very long purple patch of being able to do the right thing, and now they don't, right? Very similar with other companies, especially gaming companies, right? Well, it doesn't really matter if it works or not, but what you got to think of it. Where did I get my character? I got my character from my modeler animator who made it in Character Creator. Now you can try out Character Creator for a month free, and that's what it's called, Character Creator, right? So, yeah, what we're doing is we're going to have to amend the main menu now. And we're going to have to make sure that we have already got our controller, right? But we've not loaded it up. So basically what we want to do here is our controller as well. Yeah, we did expose it on spawn, so that's fine. So that's cool, right? So basically what we do is we don't do these things anymore, right? What we do is we drag in our controller and we're getting the fun times tonight, are we not? This is the funny thing, right? I can't be mad about getting bots and that, right? Because when I first started and basically nobody was watching, I wouldn't get any bots, right? So when I started getting bots, I was like, well, at least somebody's actually or noticing. So what we're doing now is we are setting the state. Okay, so this is actually going to become this. right? And then for the idle, what we just basically do is type idle, and that does that, and that goes in there, right? And all I need to do is copy these two all the way down and then just swap out the correct thing. So I suppose that's what we'll do, because that's what we were doing. How come I always do this, by the way? Always start with good intentions, right? Of here's what I'll type in what I'm going to do, right? And then always 5 minutes before I start, I change my mind, right? Or not necessarily change my mind, but I remember something else that I need to do first, and then end up doing that, right? And this is one of the problems of developing this stuff like live, because basically and especially when you do it twice a day, because you can't pre-plan anything, right? Because you end up working on something else, or you end up working. Okay, Poobel, answer this one every other day. Okay, number one, Unreal Engine 5, as far as I'm concerned, is not ready for prime time yet. It's not far off, but there's too many little niggly issues with it. And there's still a few plugins that don't work with it, and I would rather avoid those issues. That's point number one. Point number two, and probably not very important to me, is it makes my computer run 10 degrees hotter. Right? Not that, well, my computer's water cooled, but it still does it. Right? So that's not a good thing. What was I doing there? I think I just clicked on the wrong thing. Yeah, I did. Right? So that's point number two. Makes my computer run a lot hotter. Okay. Point number three. I don't use Lumen, and I don't use what's the other one? Lumen and Nanite. Okay. And the final point is Unreal Engine 5 is basically the same as Unreal Engine 4.27, except with Lumen and Nanite and a new interface. Right? It's based on the same code base as 4.27. Well, yes, there is, eventually. Right? Because obviously, any new features that come, right, will obviously be added to Unreal Engine 5, and they may not be added to previous versions, right? So there is a reason to use it, but for me at the moment, I just don't think it's got enough advantages over 4.27. Right, if you're new to Unreal Engine, right, and you're doing your first project, then go for it. Use Unreal Engine 5. Yeah, sure, go for it. Because probably by the time you actually get your first project in some sort of workable way or state for release will probably be on about Unreal Engine 5.0.9, at which point it will be a lot more stable and all the plugins and all the rest of it will all work. It's not as I said, it's not like I'm never going to use it, right? I use it for doing, you'll notice if you check my channel, I use it for the tutorials, right? Because people now who are getting into Unreal Engine for the first time are all using Unreal Engine 5, which is why I did the tutorials in Unreal Engine 5. But you'll notice that I don't actually change anything between what I would do in 4.27. There's nothing different about it. Right, so it's just really preference. That's all it is. Anyway, I'm going to go and grab a cigarette. I shall be back in 2 minutes. If you're enjoying the stream, hit like and subscribe. In the description, you'll find links to the Discord and also to support the channel on Patreon and my previous game, which Cybershell was talking about, on Steam. And even just adding it onto your wish list helps. So I shall be back in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere, guys. Okay guys, we're back. Now, if there's any of you guys in chat that want to see how to do any particular thing, let me know. I have got no problem going back and showing somebody how to do a particular thing, or showing them how I did a particular thing, right? Because at the end of the day, the thing about Unreal Engine and Unity and all these things is it gives you a million ways to do the same thing. Right, so if you look at a tutorial on how to do a thing, I'll guarantee you there's another 5 tutorials out there that do exactly the same thing in a different way. Right, so we should now be able to run this and it should work as before, but we've now changed the controlling of the character, right, back to the actual controller rather than the menu. Well, it's still the menu that activates it, but it's the controller that fires these things, right? And I think the charge should be on play game and the other way around, because when you leave the game you're going to be sad, right? So as I said, if anybody wants to see a particular thing, like how you bring in like animations from Mixamo and get them working and all that kind of stuff, then just let me know, right? But the point here is when we press play game, right, we have this intermediate level, right, that you're going to be able to run about in, right? And it's all going to change, but these pictures here are going to be our levels. Now when you go up to it, it's going to bring up the indicator, as you can see, and you can actually press the button to start the level, right? But what I've got to do is get graphics for these and level names. Now, because we have, and that's blooming loud, isn't it? Right, we'll turn that down a bit. Right, so we've got an interact button, right? And basically if we hit the interact button, it should do something, which it's not doing. Right, well that's kind of weird. And it's PM Chronicles, right? Has this done some weird, I know what it is. Right, here's the thing about Unreal Engine to keep your eye on, right? Say this uses spacebar, right? Well, when you're setting up your, yeah, it's a level hub cyber shell. It's where you're going to select the levels from, right? Now, the point here is the reason it's not working is because this is set to spacebar, or there's other things set to spacebar, right? And I've got interact set to H. Right, now I changed that the other night. I don't know why it's doing that. Or maybe I set it back, or maybe it crashed or something, right? But we'll do that again to prove that it actually does blooming work. Right, so basically you'll go into your hub here, which is going to be more scary than this, right? But this is just the basic layout for the moment. And you can basically run up to this and hit H. And apparently you can't anymore. And this should interact. Well, shiver me timbers, this was working yesterday. It was working perfectly. Well, that's weird. So I can only assume that the project settings have went to pot, which is great. So this is H. Right, so let's set it to F for a laugh. Right. This is really weird because this was working yesterday. Well, apparently today it's decided not to work. Right, so what we need to do is we go to level picture. And this is the thing that should get called. Right. And what we'll do is we'll go to here, and then if we look at our controller, which is this, where's our default shit? Have I hidden it again? Yeah, apparently I've hidden it again. Right, so the thing is, we need to know what our selected object is. Right, so we need to go to Chronicles and interact item. Right, we need to know what this is. I'm sure the input is working. There's something weird otherwise. As I said, it was working yesterday. I don't know why. Oh, it's because I'm an idiot. That's why. It's because this interact action, I bloomin' renamed it to have spaces. Interact with item. Interact with item. You'll notice there's spaces in between that, and the reason I had to put the spaces in is when I was doing the key bindings, right, so that it looks right. I'll show you that as well. Right, so this is going to work fine now. It's just I'm an idiot and forgot to change it. Right, so in here I needed the spaces to make it look right, so that's why I put the spaces in. But then obviously if you rename an input action like that, it basically loses the reference to it within your code, which is why this then fecked up. Right, so none of my code was wrong, I didn't change anything. Right, and if we go back, well, it's going to break anyway, but, and I don't mean break as in not work, I mean break as in I have a breakpoint in. So if we go to there and hit the button, there we go, right? So that was all that was wrong with it. So we disable that and we resume, and it'll take a minute because it's, well, not that long. Right, so there we're into our level, right? So we can now go and pick up our minimap, right, which is all coloured because I've got lights in it. Right, but otherwise we've got 166 pickups that we need to pick up. etc, etc. I've moved the monster about 2.5 miles away, so he's not going to bother us for the moment, right? Right, and I added these in yesterday that you've got to interact with them now, so that's all working perfectly. But the difference now is that I want these pictures, right, to actually set themselves up. Now I've already set up a struct, right, that we're going to add database, and basically we're going to add a few little things here, right? We're going to add in the picture that we're going to use and the level name. Now I've already thought, and here's a question for you guys in the chat, I need some levels of name, or names of levels, right? And they've got to be vampire related, right? And they've got to be either A, clever, or B, a pun, or C, both, right? Now, my idea for the very first level is minute stake, but stake spelt with a S-T-A-K-E, okay, because you use stakes to kill the vampires, right? Now, the only thing I haven't added to the game yet that isn't kind of vampire related is garlic, but if I'm going to add garlic, it's going to be some kind of a joke, right? Because I don't think anybody believes that garlic stops vampires, right? But anyway, where did I put these? Probably put these in the main menu somewhere. Now, at the moment, these pictures are being set up procedurally, or they're being procedurally generated, right? And they're procedurally generated in the level as well, but I'm not going to be doing this. What I'm going to be doing is we're going to be setting these images to be actually something in particular, like maybe let's have a look at what I'm talking about here, right? What I'm talking about is we might just have the levels as, let's say black with like text, right? And we'll have some sort of a I can't remember what the scary one's called. I think it's called Wolf something. Right, there's Wolf Moon, right? So we set it to Wolf Moon, then we'll set it to like 48, then we'll have red, and then we'll type something, right? So say we wanted the first one to be like minute stake, right? And I don't, see, I didn't really want that. See, I'm rubbish at this as well. What I want to do is I want to spin it round, which means that I'm probably going to have to, right, okay, whatever. Right, we'll do this, right? We'll do it back the way we were. Right, so we'll say minute stake. Except obviously that's the wrong way to spell it, right? And then what I'd have to do is like cut this or copy it, right? And then paste it. And then have it something like that, right? And then do a fill with black and fill that back in. And apparently I'm rubbish at that as well. which doesn't surprise me really. Right, and we don't really want to do that either because that's just rubbish. Right, wait a minute, get the... Right, that's a better blacky colour. Right, so let's say that's the picture for the first one, right? That's the kind of idea that I would have in this particular instance, right? To bring this in, or even what we could do. Right, I'm going to undo that. Right, and then what we'll do is that, then we'll set that to bigger so that we can actually just paint this out better. Right, now if we did that, right, and then we copy that, right, and then we paste it, but now we make it like bigger, right, then that would be the kind of idea for the levels, right? If you get my idea here. But I'm going to have to get the correct size to make these, right? Before I actually make them. Right, so we can actually do it here, right? Because this obviously does something. And they're going to be landscape scale. And as I said, we're going to be doing something different with this. And that's us getting the actual picture. And then we're setting the scale to use. And we've got portrait scale, which is 0.58 by 0.9. Right, but we don't want portrait scale, we want landscape scale, which is 1.2 by 0.88. Right? So if that's the case, then we could go back to here, we could go to the image, resize it, and we could set it to 1220 by 880. Right, is that the right? Is that what actually it was? 1.2 by 0.88. Yeah, that's what it was. So what we can do is, if we go to the image, resize it, that's going to be 1200. So this is the size of the image, and now what we can do is we can bring this down in size. We just say maintain the aspect ratio, right? And then we just say, let's say 400, and then we can file, save as, we'll create a new folder and we'll say level images, right? And this can be one. Actually, we'll just call it level 1. And we'll save that. We'll OK that. Right, so let's get this working, shall we? That sounds like a good idea to me. Right, so in our level here, we're going to create a new folder and we're going to say level images. Then we're going to open this up. Then we're going to go to our imports and level images and we'll drag this in. Okay. Now we're going to use this in a second or two, but in the meantime I have to go for a comfort break, so I shall be back in 2 minutes. Be right back, guys. Okay guys, sorry about the interruption, but we're back, and if you're still there, Cyber, This project has only been going for 2 weeks, just over 2 weeks, that's all. Alright, and now we are doing level stuff, right, which I believe, and this is pickups, teleporters, and I suppose we should really keep it in here, but I do have a level thing. I'm pretty sure I've got a level-y thing. Alright. And maybe I don't. So this is the main menu. So we're not really interested in that per se. And to be fair, it's not really to do with the HUD. It's actually more to do with the levels. So if anything, I should really put this in here, right? So what I'll do is I'll create a new folder in here and I'll call it struct, and then we're going to create, I'm sure I've got a struct by the way called level struct, but I suppose we're just going to have to create another one and then find that other one and delete it wherever I find it. So we're going to call this struct underscore level, and I'm absolutely damn sure we'll call it level number, and that's going to be integer. In fact, we'll just call it number, and then we're going to have an image, right, and that's going to be texture 2D, and that'll do us for now. We might need to build this up out a bit. Oh, in fact we need at least one more, right? So we need one more, so we'll add one more and we'll put name, right, and that's going to be a string. I'll tell you that you can't do it in Blueprints. You can't do that in Blueprints. The only thing you can really use is there's a free download on the asset thing that's async loading, which basically what happens in Blueprints when you load the screen is basically everything stops, right? So if you've got a and that's my sister, and the circuit, if you've got a circular throwbar, it'll stop while it's loading other level, right? And you'll notice that is the standard what do you call it, behavior, right? But you can load a, what's the word I'm looking for here? Yeah, you can find on the asset store the async async loading screen, which basically does what you want, but it won't have like a loading thing with a progress bar. All it'll have is like you can select a background picture, you can select a throbber, you can select text and whatever to say loading or blah blah, whatever you want really, right? And basically that'll keep running and keep animated as you load a level, so it doesn't look like you're basically the program stopped, right? But that's as far as you can go in Blueprints, right? You have to program it in C++ if you want to do actual loading stuff in screens. And that's because automatically anything that's done in your HUD is run on a different thread in C++, right? So you'd have to do it in C++, basically. So good luck with that. I'm sure there's tutorials on it, but it's just something none of the stuff that I've done has been loading long enough to make it worth the bother to have anything past like a circular throbber or a throbber of your own inclination, basically. So hopefully by not answering your question, I have answered your question. Right, so basically we're going to now create a data table that is going to store all of these things, and I'll show you how I have set up each of the different pictures that they accept in an integer to say which level that relate to, and what we'll do is we shall load them from a data table. Right, so we're going to go to miscellaneous and data table, and it's going to be our struct level. We're going to OK that. We're going to call it dt underscore levels, right? And we're going to only add at the moment one thing, which is going to be row number 1. And basically we'll put that in the row name as well, right? Because you'll see why in a minute, because it makes sense, right? So the number is going to be 1. Our asset is going to be called, I can't remember. And it's called level 1. Right, and it's going to be called minute stake. Right, this is just so we've got a text. As I said, there's I'll show you, right? If you go to here, right, and if I go to my library, I'll show you exactly what it's called, just to help you out. And here it's here, async loading screen. Okay, so it's this thing here, async loading screen. It's free, and well, it works in 5 apparently as well, so there you go. And you install it to the engine, so there you go. Hopefully that helps you. And remember guys, trying to get to 500 subscribers, so if you're enjoying the stream, hit like and subscribe, blah blah blah. Right, so what we're going to do now is, when we actually bring in our picture, so if we look at our picture level select, I've already got a level number, right? And if we look at our maps, well, I'm not going to show you, right? But the very first picture that we walk up to has got an index set on it as 1. Okay? So, what we're going to do is we're going to break this begin play, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable, and it's going to be called, let's call it level data, because that sounds like a good name. You can call it whatever you like, and it's going to be of the type struct level, right? So what we're going to do now is we're going to need this, right? Except this is going to be to string, and then it's actually going to end up being to name, right? But that was just a little bit of work in between that we'd have had to have done anyway in a minute, but it's not quite necessary yet, because what we're going to do is we're going to say data table, and we're going to get a data table row, and because we know that the row name is the level number, we can just do this and we don't need to loop through them. So this is going to get us our value really quick, right? So we do that, and that's a very beautiful thing. We select our asset, which is going to be DT levels. Then what we're going to do is we're going to pop our level data, and we're going to set it, and we're going to pop it in there, and that in there. Okay. And now the super interesting thing is we are going to force it from here straight into here. Okay, now we're going to allow it to pick its own frame, okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to not do this, and this is actually a material, so we're going to create a material out of this. And I'm actually going to have to change this to the material, right? So what we're going to have to do is save that, and we're going to have to go back to our struct level, and this isn't going to be a texture 2D. This is actually going to be a material. Right? So we save that, and that's going to screw this up. But what we do is we just plonk that in there, save it, and we're good. Okay. So now if we go back to our BP picture and we get our level data, the next thing we can do is break the struct, get our, well, it's actually not an image anymore, it's material, but let's not worry about that. And there we go, right? And is it random? We're not doing that. We're setting it to landscape scale. That's fine, right? So in theory, guys, if I've done this right, no, not saying I have, right? But anyway, I'm just wondering what this image is. it's image this, right, that's okay. Right, so in theory, if I've done this right, there we go. And if I was to do a second one, it would go in this one because this one's set to 2. And that's why it's blank, right? But there you go. There's how to use data tables and all sorts of stuff, right? To set up actual blueprints. And you'll notice if I stop this, right, you'll notice the frame, right? If I stop that and I press play again and go to play game, there's a possibility that it's a different frame. Well, it's not. I don't know how many different frames there are, to be honest, but I wonder how many frames there are. Suppose we could find out, because all we need to do is do this and add a breakpoint in here and then check the length -1 or even the length, right? Or alternatively, I could just click on that and find out. Yeah, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. It appears we've got 4 different frames. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right, so getting the same one all the time was kinda no very lucky. Right. So we can look at the frame there. Oh yeah, it's not in. Okay, whatever. Frames landscape. Disable this breakpoint, right? And resume. We don't seem to be getting a different frame each time. Maybe we're just unlucky. Frame landscape, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, and frames portrait, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, so in theory, right, if we set this a bit bigger, and we do that, yeah, those all look pretty much the same, don't they? No, they're slightly different colours. Right, they're slightly different. Like this one here is definitely different for this one here, right? And I suppose that one's slightly, yeah, they're slightly different colours, right? But that's really the only difference, right? So not much of a difference. You wouldn't really notice the difference unless there's more than one picture, basically, I would say, right? Because especially with the lighting. Right. So yeah, anyway, we can go in here. If we press F. Okay, and that starts as an error level. Right, now just to show you how, I'll show you how the actual game looks once we actually have the right things in the right place. For example, I have that directional light. You know what we could do? Well, think about it, right? is, just for the sake of it, we could actually add a bit of code that would take away this problem for the directional light, right? So basically, yeah, that's basically what it is, mate. It it became a project because basically I'm tutoring somebody who's a Patreon subscriber, and he showed me a video of the game, and I said, "Oh, that doesn't seem very difficult." So I basically had a mock-up running in 3 days, and I've just been gradually flushing it out as we're doing it, right? And as I said, it's basically he wanted to make a game like this, so I thought the best way to teach him is to have actually done it myself, so that when he encounters problems of how to do something, then I've already done it, right? So that's how this came about. Right, now what we could do here is, for the sake of mucking about, in the level blueprint for this, now I won't normally ever do this, but we're going to do this to save flapping about, right? What we're going to do is we're going to get all actors of class, and these are going to be directional lights, and then basically if you come in, right, we're going to do for each well, as I said, I've only seen about 2 minutes of it, and basically I took what I seen from that game as the core gameplay systems and just basically made them myself, right? So what we're going to do here is, is this intensity? And we're going to set it to 0. Right? So basically alright, do we have directional light here? Is it the intensity? I'm guessing it is. Yeah, its intensity is 10 lux, so we're setting it to 0. Okay, so if we save that, now normally I wouldn't do this in a level blueprint, right? Now, I don't intend it to be completely Dark Deception Cyber, rather, right? But it's going to stay as much like Dark Deception until I come up with a twist to it. Except, obviously, we've got a different scenario that we're using here, which is Vampire Hunter, and we're hunting vampires, right? And now, what I want to do is go back to the main menu. And if we press play now, we can look at our minimap a bit better. Right? And you'll now notice that our minimap's much better. right? Now, I can make doors either interactive or not. I've decided not to make them interactive yet. I just made them so that they open and close automatically, but there's no reason why they should necessarily open or close automatically. It was just a preference to start with. Right, now all the mechanics of Dark Deception are actually in this, so the pickups are working. There's the end of a level. Right, so you gradually get faster and faster as you pick up the level, as you pick up the stakes. Right, and there is a bad guy about here somewhere. And as you see, these pictures and all that are placed procedurally, along with these lights are placed procedurally. Some of them are hard because they need to be there, but you'll see that, you know, the lights are either there or not there or whatever, or there's no lights or whatever. Right, or there's pictures and the carpets are put down procedurally and stuff like that. Right. But yeah, the game works. As I said, we're not going to have too much. Oh, that's a nice picture. What was that? Oh. Right, and this is a teleporter. So that takes you somewhere else. And the teleporter becomes viewable again after 5 seconds, right? So if I jump through here, you'll notice that there's no teleporter, right? But in 5 seconds time it will reappear. There you go. Right, now I was going to make this definitely interactive, right? So that's going to be interactive. So that's a job for a moment or two. And as you can see, I'm rubbish at playing the game. But yeah. And we should probably have a little triangle-y thing for the player. Right? It makes sense to have like a little triangle-y thing in the middle of the screen. So I might do that as well. Well, thank you very much, Legendary. That's kind words indeed. I appreciate it. Right, so we just play it now and again just to find out what's going on and to see if there's any rather obvious things that we're actually missing that need to be added. So we definitely need to add interaction with the what do we call it? The teleporters. Right? We need to add footsteps, but I'm going to need an animation to make that make sense. Right, which I'm going to wait on my animator to come back. Oh, there's a bad guy right over there. The bad guy was there, right? And we maybe need to extend his footstep sounds, the attenuation on that one. Right, so that we get, but I'm trying to finish this, right, so it shows you that it actually works, that when you finish the level it does something, right? remember guys, if you support the game, you support on Patreon, you can get your name in the credits. I've got a database set up, data table set up so that the names come up in the credits, which I'll show you in a minute once we actually finish this. If I can finish it, we need 14. Right, is this the 14? That music isn't looping either. Ooh, interesting. Right, we need 7 more. This could be the 7. There you go. So when it finishes, blah blah blah, we get back to here. But you'll notice that in the credits, you get your name in there. But there we go. And on that, as I said, if you've enjoyed the stream, hit like and subscribe. We're trying to get to 500. It'd be great if we get 500 in the next few days, because it's kind of painfully slow at the moment, but hey ho, that's the way it goes. And check out the description, you can join the Discord, where I usually hang out when I'm not on stream. I'm usually there to ask questions or answer questions, ask questions as well, I suppose. And you can support the channel. You find links to the Patreon and my previous game on Steam, which is available, and you can even just add it to your wish list. Doesn't cost you anything, and even that helps with the Steam algorithm. So thank you for watching guys. I hope to see you again. I'll be back at 8 PM Central tonight, where I think I'm going to leave it so that I can show you me making the teleporters interactive. Okay, so you need to actually press a button. It's not going to take long, but I'll just show you the process for it. And once again, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again. Bye bye for now.